Yvette, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Take it away.
Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you so much, Carrie, for that great introduction. I'm so excited that you all are here today. There's so many places and so many things that you could be doing right now. So thank you for being here with me. And if you're catching the replay, it's nice to meet you on the replay also. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we are going
All
to
right,
get
guys.
started. Okay. Okay. So, as Carrie mentioned, welcome to the Literacy Symposium. For accessibility, there are closed captioning options and live transcription available on the bottom of your screen by clicking the closed caption button. And all these sessions will be recorded and posted on the Oregon's website by next week. And the presentation materials are in the Google Drive link in the digital program. And attendee questions, feel free to add questions to the chat or the Q&A if you would like them to be addressed. And very important, please share your feedback so that we can continue to learn and grow by scanning the QR code or clicking the link to the feedback form. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome to Differentiated Small Group Instruction in Tier 1 Classrooms, presented by me, Yvette Mans, Language and Literacy Specialist, all the things that Carrie listed, author, mom, that's important too, but really, really strong literacy advocate and cheerleader. So here's a little bit more information about me. I am a huge science of reading advocate. I really love the findings from the body of research that is the science of reading and how that shows up in the classroom environments with the approaches and the methods that we use when we serve students. Like I mentioned, I'm a language and literacy specialist, and I'm also a dyslexia practitioner. I've been a classroom teacher, an instructional coach. I've worked at a literacy research center, and I've worked with schools, school districts, and government officials and agencies on education platforms across the state of Georgia and some out of Georgia also. I am the author of the Phonics Read Aloud series, which is in 55,000 classrooms in the United States, Canada, and Australia, and also the founder of National Schwa Day. So if you celebrated that on April 7th, if not, join us for the next National Schwa Day. It's a lot of fun, reminds us all to be unstressed like the schwa. And if I look a little familiar, there are over 1.9 million views with instructional videos that I've made about the 44 phonemes or other model lessons of what the science of reading looks like in action in the classroom. And I'm a Peloton enthusiast, so if you're a Peloton enthusiast, feel free to drop your tag in the chat and we can follow each other. So here are our goals for today's session. I would really love if we could work together to understand the purpose and structure of small group instruction in Tier 1 settings. Then we're going to take a look at how to use data to really formulate our groups in a way that's not overwhelming. It's not like doing the most, but it's meaningful and manageable. And then look at strategies for skill-based instruction and progress monitoring, making sure it's in alignment with what your district or school mandate, decides that you should do, or other opportunities for ways to keep up with the progress that your students are making. And I always like to do a little slide about our shared agreements. I don't like to say these are our session norms, like, rawr. I don't want to make them sound like that. But in this space, we can all mutually commit to asking questions, engaging in the chat, using the reaction features if you feel compelled to, but also keeping an open mind to new approaches and new methods, and honoring the voices and experiences of everyone in our learning space today. This is a shared space for us to convene and to share ideas, and everyone's voice matters. So if anyone agrees, can I get a thumbs up in the chat? Or I see a lot of thumbs. Okay, good. So no session norms, but these are our shared agreements for today. And if I don't adhere to these, please call me out and say, no, Yvette, you're not following the shared agreements. So today's framework is based off the MTSS and RTI framework. And we know that this is a multi-level system that uses data to provide tailored support for all students. And so Tier 1 usually consists of high-quality core instruction for everyone. And then Tier 2 usually consists of targeted interventions for some. And then Tier 3 can consist of intensive support for a few of our learners. So this is what we're really going to be looking at. My area of expertise is Tier 1 and Tier 2 in full transparency. So we're going to look at Tier 1 today. And so research shows us that small group instruction has a high effect size for student achievement. I put this research in here because sometimes when I work with schools and classrooms, there is a misconception that small group instruction does not occur in Tier 1 settings. And that's exactly the opposite. We want to give our students just what they need in Tier 1 settings so that we can utilize the MTSS framework in an effective way, but also meet the needs of our learners. So we're going to look at small group instruction today. We're going to look at assessment and screeners and diagnostics and even how to manage all those groups happening simultaneously. So when I'm referring to small group instruction, I'm referring to skill-based and strategy-based small group instruction that is teacher-led. And this is really targeted instruction that meets students where they are with their level of proficiency. And I like to look at things through an asset-based lens to where it's not like necessarily deficits, but it's opportunities for growth and progress. So small group instruction has been really effective from what I've seen and from what I've implemented, because you get a lot less student frustration and undesirable behaviors when you're meeting students at their level, because the tasks are more attainable where you're beginning where they are and it's not so far out of reach. But students tend to be more engaged, and you can still provide teacher scaffolding and support, but also it gives you an opportunity to take anecdotal notes and to give immediate feedback. And you can also differentiate the tasks within the homogeneous groups. So for instance, if you have a group of students in your skill-based small group who are working on consonant digraphs, and they may be having difficulty with differentiating between voiced and unvoiced TH, you can still vary the task. Maybe if there's one or two within that group, you can vary the task or the level of scaffolding and support that you provide those students within your homogeneous groups. So there's still a lot of opportunity. And of course, the low student to teacher ratio that occurs. And this is where I tend to see the most growth with what happens in small group instruction. So I'm a huge fan of small group instruction, and I hope you are too. And if you're not, I hope by the end of the session that you will be. So we're personalizing learning to meet diverse student needs. We're increasing our time on task with smaller, manageable groups. And we're creating space for data-driven and skill-based teaching. That's what small group instruction does for us. And those are some of the benefits for small group instruction. So you might be asking yourself, well, why should I use diagnostic assessments to gather data for small groups? I have a universal screener. I have my own assessments. I've got all the tests. I feel like I'm always testing. That should be enough information for me to make a decision to do what I know what my students need. So I want everyone to put their imagination caps on and imagine that one day you wake up and you're having horrible aching foot pain. I'm not wishing this on anyone, but for the sense of for the sake of today, you know that your foot is in pain. It's uncomfortable to walk, to put pressure on it. It's throbbing, it's aching, and you have no clue what happened. You know the symptoms of this foot pain, but you don't quite know the cause. So you go to the doctor performs specific tests and gives you a proper diagnosis so that you can heal and that you can recover. Now, imagine if you were to only go to the doctor and, or the ER, and at intake, they're just like, oh, let me get your temperature and your blood pressure, go home and put some ice on it. That may not be the solution that you need. You might need, maybe you do need ice, maybe you may have gout, maybe you have a sprain, maybe you need a cast. Diagnostics help us to pinpoint exactly what it is so that we can heal, recover, and move forward and continue progressing and walking forward. So I like to think of diagnostic assessments in that same vein. And I put a visit to the reading doctor because we are practitioners and we're, improving the health and well-being of our children. So this is an analogy that I like to think of. And those diagnostic assessments help us to really pinpoint what the treatment plan is for individual students. We may know the symptoms, right? They're not comprehending, or their fluency is lacking, or they're unable to decode. But when you got diagnostic assessments that tells you exactly what you need to do, we got to follow the doctor's orders so we can get better and improve. So just wanted to share that with you. Again, not wishing foot pain on anyone here. So when you're incorporating diagnostic assessments after your administration of a universal screener, you may ask yourself, what does that look like? And also, again, there's often a lingering question, what is the point of diagnostic assessments? Why do I need to do this? And I wanted to share with you a video of a school here in Georgia where I'm based. I'm based in Atlanta, but this is Marietta City Schools, which has made great progress for implementation of science of reading and professional development and really following the MTSS model. These are some staff members talking about how diagnostics and those assessments have impacted their practices. So I'm going to play, it's a short video, but I'm going to play this video for you.
Diagnostic assessments have helped my teaching by really letting me focus in on the specific needs of each small reading group, and I'm able to meet them where they are with the skills they already have solid and mastered, and start building where they have gaps.
And for me, the diagnostic assessments really help me focus on what the skill that they are lacking. Is it fluency? Is it phonics? Is it one-syllable words? Is it two-syllable words? Is it suffixes or prefixes? Is it vocabulary? And then you can really hone on that skill, encoding, decoding, because some students are better at one or the other, or may need more support in one or the other. If you get stuck, I will tell you the word so you can keep reading. When I say stop, I may ask you to tell me about what you read, so do your best reading. You're going to start here, and you're going to go across the page. You ready? Yes. You may begin. Jagged is the second word. An example of how the diagnostic assessments help direct and lead my teaching is if they have trouble decoding words rather than reading whole words, or spelling as opposed to reading. So I can really focus on that skill and not just we're working on fluency or working on comprehension. Using the data and the notes from the data helps us to see which area they're really truly struggling in, so I can focus my instruction specifically on that weakness. Can you say this one more time for me? Okay, I'm going to turn the page. Now this is a page of real consonant, lens, and digraphs. Can you start right here and go down? An example in the group that we may see in the data is how they are mastering the real words and may not be mastering the nonsense words, which can tell me that they may be a whole word reader and may not have a strong foundation in those phonics skills. So we can really dive in and explicitly teach those phonics skills when reading and writing.
Okay, so in the chat, I would like for you to share your thoughts about this video. What did you notice that the specialists are doing? Or what do you notice that they are not doing? Or what's something that you're already doing that you just kind of agree with? I'll give you a second to utilize the chat to share what are your takeaways from this last video. Tammy says that the skills were targeted to the student, immediate feedback to the student for corrections. Great, Tammy. And Martha says she notices that they're utilizing explicit directions when prompting students to the task. I love that. Nothing is implied. We want to be direct and explicit. Great job highlighting that. Keegan says they're being very prescriptive in their instruction. Yes, Keegan, I totally agree. And Emily shared identifying targeted skill gaps using data to make instructional adjustments. Yes. And Carrie says she likes the idea of being able to hone in on specific phonics skills that might be missing. Shannon is talking about targeting the individual skill gaps. Chantel says at our school, we're not at that point yet. We just began universal screening this year. I hope this will be our focus for next year. Yes, that's that mindset that we were talking about in our shared agreement. Thank you for sharing that, Chantel. Oh, wow. Yeah, and Carrie shared that she noted the purpose of nonsense words and how nonsense words can be put before students to see if they've really broken the code and can decode words that are not familiar to them. Heather, a literacy coach, shares that small group is not one size fits all. Using diagnostic screeners allows the teacher to know their student by skill and by name. Very good. Thank you for sharing those takeaways. And that's just a small snippet. You know, this was an interview that was done with teachers, but we're able to pick up on things that are best practices. And if we're not yet doing them, then we can start doing them soon. Okay, where's my cursor? There it is. Okay. So usually when I'm talking to schools and districts about implementing universal screeners or diagnostic assessments, they always say when, how, and who. Like, how is this going to happen, right? So I want to think about the logistics for administering diagnostic assessments because that's a huge part. You can't get the what until you figure out the how. And the how sometimes means all hands on deck. Train everyone with the capacity and with the ability to help with the administration. There is one school here in Atlanta where the music teacher participated, the instructional coach, the EIP pullout teacher, and the principal. They pulled students for administering one-to-one assessments. And it was interesting for the principal to see, he saw firsthand, like, okay, this helps me to understand why the teachers are doing what they're doing, and it helped the principal learn, and it helped the teachers gather the information to make instructional decisions. And it's really helpful. A lot of paraprofessionals participate. So they may have cohorts of paraprofessionals where they're receiving professional learning, or they're pulling students and administering these diagnostic assessments at once. But as an instructional coach or as a literacy leader in your school building, you can gather everyone, do a training, do a mock assessment where teachers, they role play and they're able to troubleshoot what may occur or prompt students in the correct way. But it's really helpful to have all hands on deck, and it builds a sense of communal ownership over the assessment process. It doesn't just become, oh, something else I've got to do, but it's like, this is happening for a purpose, and we're all invested into getting the information that we know will help us to serve our students the most. So for assessment administration, you might need, the recording sheets, the teacher recording sheets. You could have the assessment that the students read from. I like to laminate mine or put them in page protectors, or, make them in a bright color, put them on cardstock. So we know which one is the student copy, and then have a bunch of recording sheets and clipboards. I could also work with schools to make sure that they, every teacher knows who's on their caseload. So if the art teacher is helping, she pulls these 5 students from this class, that's her load. And then day 2, maybe the gym teacher could pull 5 students from another class. But taking the time to plan for the assessment administration makes it go a lot more smoothly. And so, of course, you would need the master schedule to make sure you're not pulling students from lunch or going too late in the day. And a lot of people put a desk in the hallway, or they may have 2 desks in the hallway where the assessment administrator is sitting on one side, and then the students kind of rotate and cycle out of the student seat, and all the student materials just stay static at that spot. If you have an additional room, that might be helpful, but a good, clear, stress-free, quiet, focusable, if that's a word, environment is really helpful. So you could think about that as far as the timeline. For us here in Georgia, our pre-planning starts in July. Teachers go back to school in July, and the kids are back sometime the last day of July or early August. Where I'm from in New York, we don't go back to school until after Labor Day. So the time that could occur, you may want to give people and children a chance to trickle in, or maybe after the first 10 days of school, then you could find a timeline that works with the other needs that are happening at the top of the year. Assessments for diagnostics do not only occur at the top of the year. I like to do beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year to show progress. But of course, there's progress monitoring that gives us the information that we can use to reconfigure our groups and our instructional plans. Okay. So I am sharing one of my favorite diagnostic assessments, the core phonics survey. There is like a big purple book that I'd always carry it in my teacher bag and it would weigh me down, but it was worth it. It was very worth it. So this is an example of a diagnostic assessment that could help us to find out if our students are proficient in letter names, letter sounds, and different skills at the word level with decoding, and it assesses each phonetic pattern in each section, which is really good to give a student set of terms within those categories to test and see if they do know that information. There's the recording form, and then there's the student form, and there are real and nonsense words. And so Carrie highlighted the importance of nonsense words, and we saw that in the video, whereas some students may have adapted to where they commit so many words to memory, that it's hard to tell if it's a familiar word, but with nonsense words, that's not always the case. So even as a dyslexia practitioner, I've noticed that a lot of the clients that I serve have adapted to commit so many words to their reading brain in order to kind of sustain and fit into different environments. And we all have a different reading brain where we've got our own personal sight words. And so with nonsense words, that helps us to make sure that we can accurately assess how students are decoding words and mastering these blending and decoding activities. When you're using the core phonics assessment, the students will see a larger print document, and that's what will be facing them. And then you have a recording sheet. So on the recording sheet, it has the skills separated, and you see that we have the alphabet skills. So there are 26 letter names that are uppercase, 26 letter names that are lowercase. Some of my teachers like to change the lowercase names to a total of 28. So they could add that fancy A that kind of hooks around and then has the bubble. I don't know the name of it. And then the other G that kind of has the hump a little bit. You can do that if you want to. I'm seeing them less prominent in children's literature, but they still exist. So sometimes people change that to 28 and they just add the other two variations of the letter A and G on the student sheet. And then it goes into consonant sounds and long vowel sounds and short vowel sounds. The next category with reading and decoding skills, you'll see that it's sorted out with CVC words, short vowels with digraphs and TCH trigraph, consonant blends with short vowels, long vowel spellings, variant vowels and diphthongs, not just R-controlled vowels, but L-controlled vowels too. We know that L can change the way that vowels are articulated in words, such as in ball, and even if there's other words or consonants that impact how vowels are articulated, such as the letter W. It can make an A sound more like ah instead of ah, like in wall. That's a variation of the letter A sound, but it gives you an example here. And then multisyllabic words. If you would like to do spelling skills, there are dictation opportunities for encoding with initial consonants, final consonants, CVC words, and long vowel spellings. And at the bottom, there are categories where it says skills to review and skills to teach. So usually some schools will do, if they categorize 6 or more correctly in one category. So for example, if they get 6 out of 10, let me be clear, or more than half, then they will progress to the next category. But if it's less than half, then they kind of stop right there and right at the bottom, like we need to review this skill and then move on to the skill that is placed under it. So I would recommend to check with your literacy specialist to see how you all are going to norm in administration and what is the deciding factor for whether moving on or stopping or continuing in this type of diagnostic assessment. I'm going to share a brief snippet of this video. This video is 4 minutes long, but I like to use this with teachers, just kind of showing what this could look like. Before I even press play on the video, I see that the student seems to be a little relaxed. He's kind of lounging in his chair, foot up. You know, it's not a high stress environment. And we'll see how the teacher and test administrator prompts this student. So we're just going to watch a little clip of this video.
Okay, so like I said, we are going to now be reading some letters and some words, all right? And so the first thing I want to start with are the names of these letters in this box right here. Okay, honey, I want you to start right here. Just go across the page and just tell me the names of these letters. Don't go too fast though, so I can keep up with you. Okay, because I have to write down what you say. Okay, you want to use, if you want, you can use your finger to help you.
With the sound.
Just the name. Mm-hmm.
DANSXZJLHTYECOMRPWKUGBFQVI.
Fantastic. Now, I want you to tell me the names of these letters, starting right there. Good. Wes. I noticed you said I for this one at first, and you quickly corrected yourself. Good. How do you know that's not an I? Right. Good. Excellent. Okay. So now you're doing great. Now I want you to tell me the sounds, okay, of the letters in this box down here. Okay, starting here, going across, just like before.
X Z J Y S A
Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I got behind. Good. What's that sound? Yep. Good. Fantastic. Good job, honey. It's hard when I ask you to tell me the letters and then tell you the sounds, huh? I changed it up on you. Fantastic, honey. All right, so now these letters. I want you to tell me the sound that these letters make. How about that one? Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. And this one? It's okay. Take your time. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a sample of the core phonics survey being administered. So again, in the chat, what are some things that you notice that the educator does? Something maybe you do differently, maybe something you would do the same, and please share your thoughts. I'm going to look at the chat. What did you notice with this administration of the core phonics survey? I love that. She asked how he knew to self-correct and super quick assessment. Yes, so much data. It is so fast and so manageable. It does not have to be a huge to-do where it's overwhelming. You're able to get to, you know, to the point. Honestly, you can get to the point very easily. I've seen some people administer different assessments from beginning of the year to middle of the year to the end of the year. So it's not always the same order of the letters since they're out of alphabetical order. Carrie, did you want to share?
I was going to ask a question if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm thinking about a lot of districts that I work with who do a universal screener 3 times a year, who are screening all their students, who may have 50% or so of students who are showing up at grade level.
Mm-hmm.
And so may not need to dig deeper on every student.
Mm-hmm.
So with the districts that I work with, I would recommend to them to do the diagnostic on students who are not at grade level. Is that what you would recommend too? Or would you like to see people doing the diagnostic on everybody?
That is a great question. I'm so glad you asked that because I didn't have that in my presentation, but that's a great question. I always encourage for everyone to get the diagnostic assessment because what you will often find that there may be some deficits that were or learning areas or opportunities that were overlooked. Like if you look at this student, he could be in second or third grade and may be decoding certain words or could be having problems with certain words. And if we look at this diagnostic assessment, we would see that there could be some review of letter sounds that would help this student to move forward. And the diagnostic assessment is really great because it helps us know where to kind of dial back a little bit, but it also reveals those little gaps in the foundation. That will help us to close that so students can move forward. And diagnostic assessments are really great for students who are on grade level because if they are, if they've already showed mastery of those skills, then there's an advanced decoding portion too that shows us how to push students to the next level while still spiraling in previously taught skills. So great question, Carrie. Thank you for that because I wasn't clear about that. I highly recommend, and especially with schools I work with, everyone has their universal screener, everyone has a diagnostic. And I'll share more information about how that's meaningful and it's really important for an activity that you might want to try at your school. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Keegan shared that it aligns to the scopes and sequences very well too. And Martha says that it's not perfect. You can always pause and redirect. Right. It's not like it has to be very rigid. You're allowed to give think time. I would just recommend that you norm as a school. One school says that they have up to 5 seconds for think time. And if not, then they move along. They may mark it as as an error or as a reteaching opportunity, and then they move forward. And Keegan said, I think it's good for all because so many kids have memorized words. I'm seeing that a lot more often. Than previously. So great point, Keegan. I really love this. And then of course we've got the nonsense words, right? And no matter the age, there may be some deficits. And true transparency, it wasn't until I started teaching that I realized that there were more letter sounds than there were letter names. I don't know if I was sleeping undergrad that day in class or something, but I was not prepared to have the wealth of knowledge from self-study, from professional development, from sessions like this to learn what to look for. So it's kind of cool because you're learning along the way too, and you're practicing and refining your practice too. And from Shanahan shares that reading proficiency grows with targeted interventions based on students' needs. So these diagnostic assessments helps us to identify students' needs. And I intentionally chose a picture of older students in this because there are middle schoolers and high schoolers who could benefit from diagnostic assessments as well. So even if they're doing universal screeners in upper grades, you may find, especially if you're an upper elementary teacher and you're here, or if you're teaching middle or intermediate, depending on what you call it, in high school, this diagnostic can be helpful. And I've even used this with adults, and it's been very helpful. So this information from the diagnostics helps us to dig into the data, and we want to use a data-driven approach. So the evidence from student assessments helps us to inform instructional decisions. So data is the car that we're driving, and the instructional decisions is the route, and success is our destination. But it really helps us to make sure that the teaching that happens is a good use of your time and your students' time and both of your effort to make sure that you're meeting their needs and getting to the areas of growth. So now let's kind of go back a little bit. We were talking about small group instruction, and then we went into diagnostic assessments after universal screeners. But what happens before we get to that small group instruction in the tier 1 classroom? Like the reason why we're here, right? Like where is that missing step in between? So let's recap. We want to dig into the data, collect the data, use our screeners and our diagnostic assessments. Then we want to analyze trends. So patterns in student performance to determine skill gaps that try to come out all at once. But you might even see trends amongst students. And if you're collaborating or doing PLCs or professional learning communities, you might see opportunities for growth amongst the grade level too. And then you would group your students based on their shared skill needs with manageable groups. So typically 5 to 8 students in a group, and 8 is really pushing it for my liking, but of course use your discretion depending on need. If it's a group of students that has more need, I wouldn't go as high as 8. That's just too many. You could split that group, even if they're working on the same skill, you can split it into 2 groups of 4. But my ideal personally is like 4 to 6. 8 is a really big stretch, but I have some schools that have 26 students in a class. So that's how it works with their literacy block and time allocation to make sure that they can see everyone. But anywhere, let's say 4 to 8-ish, you can scale down a little bit, but I would not go over 9 for those homogeneous groups. And homogeneous groups are groups of students who are grouped with like need. So all the students who need help with CVC words would be in one group. Students that would need help decoding R-controlled words, or students who need help decoding multisyllabic words with varied syllable types could all be in one group, and you would provide your instruction accordingly. So as you look at the data and you disaggregate the data, it's helpful sometimes to look at the universal screener and see what information you got from there, and then look at the more pinpointed targeted information of the diagnostic assessment. So looking for those patterns in word errors or common hesitations. It's really good too when you administer the core phonics survey to write anecdotal notes. Like I write them in the margin. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a line on my screen. But yeah, to write anecdotal notes in the margin. So I might say, student segments then blend, or student adds a schwa onto individual phonemes or something, so that when I'm teaching, I know to go back and make sure that I'm telling the students to just, maybe I might need to use coding boxes or some type of manipulative to help them blend more fluently, or like additive or successive blending approaches may work for that child. Or if I'm going over letter sounds with them, I may need to use resources where they're able to see like a mirror and articulate pure sounds, or prompt them to clip the sound. But the anecdotal information gives us information for instruction. And you want to make a plan to homogeneously group the students, but that's where the differentiation within those homogeneous groups occur based off of the information you or someone else gathered from the diagnostics. And let's take all that data, right? And let's make it fun. I want to share with you something I really, really love to do. I love to do this. This is called the reading draft. And so I want you to imagine it's like a football draft. I do this PD with schools where all the teachers, all the staff actually, they wear their favorite football jerseys the day of the staff meeting. So we have our staff meetings here on Tuesday, and everyone shows up to assign their teams based off of the data. And they're looking at the information from the diagnostic assessments to find common trends. And it's a really engaging kind of hands-on activity where you need a lot of wall space, a lot of table space. You could have teachers work in teams, or you could have them work individually, but they're actually moving around the data summary sheets. I'm going to show you that on the next slide, but they're moving them around to draft their teams to look for the commonalities across the class. And then the teachers are talking amongst the grade level, and they're kind of brainstorming like future instructional foci or focuses, however you prefer. But there's a lot of collaboration that occurs. So there's a time that breaks out where everyone goes into their huddle, they develop their strategy, they create their teams. But I really like this because as a teacher, I like to move around a lot, if you can't tell. And for me, sometimes, no shade to Excel, but sometimes filling out a spreadsheet didn't make it real for me. It didn't help me to understand, even if I had a pre-populated spreadsheet that, would turn red or yellow or green or blue, it didn't make it real for me until I moved things around and got the big picture. That's when it really sunk in. So this is not like a sit and get kind of session, but it gets everybody involved, moving, owning the process. And it's a good reason to have snacks in your staff meeting. We go all out. We decorate with like football banners, and we get the little plates for the Super Bowl, put pretzels and popcorn and all those things. But it's a purposeful, fun meeting where you're drafting teams based off of the areas of growth for your students. So I just wanted to share that as a way to compile data, disaggregate data, and make instructional decisions. When the teachers are moving things around, they're actually moving around these sheets of paper that are called student data profiles. And this is what the student data profile looks like. This student data profile comes from coxcampus.org. Cox Campus is a wonderful literacy research center based here in Atlanta, Georgia. It is an open access, fully funded, free science of reading course module, resources, videos, that is funded by gracious donors. I used to work with them and I still love them. I was there for 6 years, but there's so many resources, and they're IDA certified, ISET certified, and teachers here in Georgia take it as part of their recertification and professional learning. With all that being said, on Cox campus, there is a student data profile that helps us to realize that our kids are more than just a number. So instead of, again, nothing against Excel, but instead of it just saying like student ID number, this score, it is a snapshot of student skills. And I love these student data profiles because they're a great conferencing tool. When you're meeting with families, a lot of teachers ask me, I don't know what to talk about with families anymore. We're not talking about reading levels anymore. That's old news. That's yesterday's, that's expired milk. We're not doing reading levels. So what kind of tool can I use to show parents and families what their students able to do, how they can reinforce those skills at home? And that's where the student data profile came in as just a very helpful tool. And so I like to put these in a student binder or student folder, but it shows progress from beginning of year and to end of year. So this is uploaded in the Google folder. You have a copy of that if you would like to use it. And the editable form is on Cox campus, so you can download it from there. But if you take a look at this, you'll see it was a little fancy with the design, so I'm going to have to tilt my head this way. But you'll see it has the school's name, the child's name, and the teacher and the grade. And then under the assessment, you can just put the name of the universal screener that you used and then the diagnostic assessment. So this one is aligned to core and other diagnostic assessments where it separates letter names and sounds, then phonological awareness-based tasks that are considered to be pre-decoding skills that consist of segmenting sentences, segmenting syllables, blending syllables, onset rhyme, rhyming words, isolating phonemes and final or initial, and identifying phonemes, blending, and segmenting. Then it goes into beginning decoding skills like CVC words, digraphs, blends, long vowels, R-controlled vowels, long vowel teams, and variant vowels. And then advanced decoding skills covers those different syllable types and diphthongs and mixed vowel patterns too. So I'm going to show you an example of one that is completed. So this boy here is not a real boy. He attends Sample Elementary School, and his name is Evan Manning. That was the closest I could get to my own name for an example. And he's in 3rd grade, and Mrs. Smith is his teacher. So she would place the assessment name here and the diagnostic assessment here. Because Evan is in 3rd grade, her school has normed on beginning 3rd graders at the decoding category here. And so when Evan was given his inventory with his diagnostic assessment, Evan got 10 out of 10 CVC words correct, and then 9 out of 10 digraphs correct, 10 out of 10 blends, 8 out of 10 long vowels are controlled vowels, 10 long vowel teams, 2, skirt, pump the brakes. Let's pause. This is an area where we would stop. At this school, they normed that 5 or 6, was it 5 or 6? It was 5 out of 10 was an area to press pause. And so when they did the reading draft, they had one team that said, this team is all going to work on long vowel teams. Then he did not progress on to the advanced decoding survey because we saw the area where he would benefit from instruction. Does Evan only get instruction in small skill-based teacher-led groups on long vowel teams? No. Ms. Smith is spiraling skills that Evan already knows, along with the other 4 to 6, maybe 8 if you need to, students that have that area as a growth opportunity. If there is not a specific team from the reading draft that needs help with long vowel teams, but there are more students that need help with variant vowels, then she could place Evan in the group with variant vowels and differentiate the task. I like to keep those students like right next to me. I call it in my pocket, but I keep those kids in my pocket so I can kind of watch out the peripheral and easily reach over and give them what they need. If we're working on an advanced skill, spiraling previous skills, but provide the support and scaffold for Evan while Evan's in that group. If there are a bunch of students in that group that need help with long vowel teams, then great, that works. But either way, Evan and all the other students in Mrs. Smith's class are going to get what they need in small group in tier 1 classrooms. This does not mean that, that MTSS has to take over. It's like, oh my gosh, we can't do anything with Evan because he doesn't know long vowel teams. It's just an opportunity. It's just an area for growth. But having that diagnostic assessment gives us the kind of like the power to do what we know, what we need to do for our kids. You might be asking yourself, this is fine and dandy that Evan Manning is able to perform these beginning decoding skills. But what about a hypothetical different child in his class? What if this child was not able to get CVC words at all? Before I leave you on that cliffhanger, Carrie, did you have another question or comment?
Sorry to interrupt. I missed this a few minutes back. It looks like you have a question from Chantel or Chantel.
Okay. And Chantel, I hope I'm saying your name right. Oh wait, I think she had to step away. Oh, there she goes. Hey, you can come off mute or you can use the chat.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't totally stepped away. Something you said triggered something in my brain and I ran to find it. So I'm the one who our school is really just in the beginning stages of making the shift to more science-based. I'm the instructional literacy coach K-5. So I'm working with a group of teachers right now on this on this very thing. That's why I was so excited for this today. Looking at that core diagnostic survey. Is there a version that you recommend that's free? I'm pushing for next year for our district to purchase a diagnostic, and I think that they will. But for our teachers who maybe just want to use it in class at the moment to get started, they're kind of like my pilot people. Is there one that you recommend that's free without like me breaking any type of
Copyright
or copyright stuff? Yes.
Yeah, I may be incorrect, but I believe that if you buy one core manual, it allows you to reproduce for the use of school administration. So
Okay.
it was on sale for maybe like $50, but $50
Okay.
full school-wide implementation might be good. And I would encourage you maybe to check out some online resources and see if it's available with access for reproduction for school implementation. But yeah, it's one of the more affordable assessments, but it's also one that has been vetted by a lot of professionals in the field.
Okay.
So very much so encourage you to try it out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great question. And is it Chantel or Chantal?
It's Chantel. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Chantel. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So we were looking at the student data profile, and then we were raising the hypothetical question, like what would happen if an Evan or another student was unable to perform CVC-based decoding activities in 3rd grade? Would we just stop right there and just give him CVC-based instruction while he's in small groups? Let's see what we would do. Here's another great resource. I know it's a lot. It's kind of like one of those like conspiracy maps with all of the strings and pins to it, but I love this resource. This is from AIM Institute for Learning and Research. This is kind of like a flow chart, like if-then flow chart. So if we look at on the left side of the screen where it says assess decoding and phonics skills, if we've gotten to the point of where we're assessing decoding and phonics skills with letter sound fluency, nonsense word fluency, oral reading fluency, accuracy, and or a phonics inventory, then, and it shows that another student is weak in that area, it gives you an arrow to drop down and it tells you what to do next. You would assess the phonemic awareness skills. So it could be that maybe this hypothetical student is unable to decode and perform items from the phonics inventory because there's a gap in phonemic awareness or in phonological awareness. I would say most of the time, like 9 times out of 10 in a tier 1 classroom with general ed students, I usually see that this is the case. And so we would want to give a phonemic awareness based assessment to pinpoint where that gap is. Like if they're not mastering sound symbol correspondence and how those letters work together to create words that need to be decoded, then maybe we need to go back to the sound letter level or the letter level. That was a tongue twister. Sound level, letter level. But we want to dial it back. We wouldn't just stop there and say, oh, well, that's it for this child. I guess they're going to constantly get CVC word instruction, where we may need to go back. And so this guide for reading assessment has information about like letter naming fluency, oral reading fluency, nonsense word fluency. And again, this resource is available. I've uploaded this in the Google Drive for you to reference and utilize it if you're giving an assessment like this or a different type of assessment that could be helpful. But there's a lot of different options and a lot of pages in this actual guide from the AIM Institute. If you need to give a phonological awareness screening test, here is one. I believe this one is open access as well. It's called the PAST test. And this is a comprehensive assessment that is individually administered, so one-to-one, to see if a child is proficient in the components of phonological awareness and the sub skills too. So this has the recording sheets and it has like another graph where you can take a look at all the skills in one kind of snapshot too. And so this might be a good tool if you're in lower elementary or if you have students who you really need to pinpoint what is happening with phonological awareness. So this is a test that I love. Okay, so you've got your data, you've done your reading draft, you filled out your student data profiles. Oh, and let me go back. One thing I want to show you about the student data profiles. Please make sure to put a picture on your student data profile because it makes it real. Our students are more than, just a number, but it's like there's an actual face and person behind it. So that's why there's this little box here to include this picture. And you could upload the pictures. I know at our last school, whenever Life Touch took the pictures, it uploaded it to the teacher portal. And if not, I just took a picture on my cell phone and saved this as a document. But it really makes it a personal touch instead of like ID number 00587. It's like, this is Evan. And okay, so moving forward, past the decision-making flow chart. Once we have done our draft, we have our teams, we know what needs to happen in those groups. We want to name those groups. And I want to encourage you to move beyond red, yellow, green. Kids are smart. They know a lot that we sometimes don't think they know. If a student is always in the red group, they may say to themselves, I'm always in the red group. I know what red means. Or if they're always in the blue group, they may say, I'm in the blue group, so I don't need to, I've seen it. They're very wise. Children are very wise. So here are some options for things that you could do. You could use different colors like pink and green and blue and orange, Or you could tap into student interests and age appropriate and school appropriate topics. So that's important to discuss. So nothing from Fortnite, nothing, whatever those, as long as it's appropriate. That could be the names of their groups. You could let students work together to collaborate and choose their group's names if they can come to a consensus. In my own classroom, that went horribly wrong. So your students. And I just had to assign a name eventually with that one bunch. They were so outspoken. I love them, but they couldn't find a consensus on their group's name. You could also choose a theme that encourages all students. So you could have a group that's called Achievers, another one that's called Rocketers, or it just Believers, and like different kind of verbs that builds up their morale towards reading. And you would kind of know in your mind, maybe Achievers is my lowest group and I'm pulling the Achievers every day. If you have a classroom theme, you could pick a theme for the groups that coincides with your class theme. So when I was in the classroom, I had like Miss Mann's Movie Stars, and my groups were names of like Rodeo Drive and like Hollywood. And, it didn't mean anything to them, but I knew in my mind what those groups were. But just allow students to buy into the process. Like this is just part of the collective school community, and they tend to be more excited about it and take more pride in their groups. So with all that being said, what is happening during small group time? What happens in that tier 1 classroom when you're implementing small groups that are teacher-led, that are skill-based? Some activities that are including, but not limited to, so this is not an exhaustive list, this is just a suggestion of some things that I've seen, and some things that I like. There is usually an introduction or a review of a concept. Then there can be practice blending or segmenting words using manipulatives like L-Conan boxes, magnetic letters, dry erase markers. Those little pop-it things have been really fun for instruction, or anything else you have. You can have bingo chips, Cheerios, but something hands-on. It could be age appropriate and could be great to help students conceptualize with a tangible item. Then there's usually word reading tasks. So that could be like a word chaining task, or it could be reviewing high frequency words. And just for the sake of clarity, when I say high frequency words, I'm talking about like not using memorization, but using the mapping approach with phoneme grapheme mapping. So the speech to print approach, where students read the phonetically regular part of the word, and then like they would put, if they were using the heart word approach, they would put a heart underneath or on top or around the part of the word that is phonetically irregular, or they would write it in a different color. So if they're using the word said, the S is what we would expect from the letter S, the D is the sound that we would expect from the D, but in the A and I, we wouldn't necessarily anticipate the A and I to sound like eh. So you could, map that part and highlight that as an irregular part. But that can happen during the word reading task. Or I've seen dictation during that also, where we're looking at those high frequency words that we've learned or being introduced to new high frequency words. And that can happen, as well as word lists that fit the phonetic pattern that's being introduced that day or spiraled in from previously taught and mastered skills. I like to spiral in skills that I know that my small groups have mastered, because it builds up their confidence. Like if I'm going to teach them something new and foreign that they hadn't seen before, they kind of feel good about themselves. It's like a quick win. Like, yeah, I know these words, and they kind of go through it quick and their chests are puffed out. Like, yeah. And then they are more open to receiving something new. I like to see the incorporation of decodable text and or passages with correct prompting that aligns to evidence-based approaches. So no cueing, no picture. Well, you can have pictures to supplement the text, but we're not using pictures as a way to help students to figure out what the words say. Again, expired milk, spoiled, out the window, old stuff. We're not doing that. Often I see discussions about the text, like recalling or summarizing, or light questioning about the text that students are reading. I see a lot of like choral reading or maybe like one-to-one reading. So the reading could look different with the decodable passages. And I really like to see dictation and encoding occurring too, where the teachers, say the words and students write the words, or they use another tool to create the word. In one class, we had students who had assistive devices, and they loved to type into their keypads what the word was, and that still counted as dictation and encoding. There's one approach from a company based in Utah where they actually like stand up and they put their dry erase markers on the wall, and the teacher dictates the word, and they say like, the word is that. And then the kids would catch the word and bring it back up to their ears and say that. And then they would write it and encode it. And that was their dictation procedures. But the kids knew like clockwork, whenever it was time for dictation, they grabbed their dry erase board, stuck it to the wall, and they wrote and did their dictation practice that way. Dictation can be word level or sentence level, or it could be letter based, especially if you're working on sound symbol correspondence. And there's so much more that can happen in small group time because, like someone said earlier, small group is not one size fits all. We could have in one class, it could look very different with what happens in small group time, but this is the most common that I see. And I put a little bullet that says and more. So if you're in the chat or you want to put in the chat something that you do in small group time that I left off this list, please place it here, because our shared agreement number 3 is that we're all going to learn for each other and honor each other's voice. So if you have something really, really cool that you're doing in small group, please leave it in the chat. And I'm looking at the chat here. Oh, Carrie said everyone always wants to be the cheetahs. That's a fun team name. And all the resources. Thank you. Okay, I'm looking at the chat here where Caitlin says she's an online teacher where her only small reading groups are tier 2. Do I think this tool and diagnostic assessment would still be beneficial to use for tier 2 small groups to inform instruction? And or is there anything I would add to adapt to use it in that setting? Nice question, Caitlin. And Carrie, I'm going to ask you to come off mute too, because I want to get your opinion. I don't know everything and I don't claim to know everything, but I know what I know, and I would love to hear too. So I think for small group, what I've seen, especially when we were virtual a couple years back, is that some people would use breakout rooms in Zoom, and then they would have the students read it on the screen and still use the recording sheet as well. Do I think it would be beneficial to use for tier 2 small groups to inform instruction? I say yes. Carrie, do you think that the core phonics survey or a decoding or diagnostic assessment for tier 2 would be helpful for instruction too?
Absolutely. Actually, Matt Burns in the last session was talking about using diagnostics for tier 2 and tier 3 to really hone in on what specific skills students need and really target the instruction to that. And especially as a prerequisite skill for the next level in the acquisition of reading skills. So really looking at like, what is the earliest foundational skill that a student needs in that progression, and really targeting that, and then moving to the next foundational skill. So definitely, I think a diagnostic is an excellent tool for tier 2 and tier 3. I have a fun thing that I'll share in the chat for a small group phonics practice.
Nice.
Was there another question about that I missed right before that?
No, I just wanted to get your opinion on the tier 2. I like to use diagnostics across, like in a tier 1 setting, so that when students are receiving their supports, that information or the student data profile, but the information kind of travels with them to make sure that everyone's on one accord about what that child needs. And they may get, more assessments or different types of assessments, but I'm a strong advocate of that too. So thanks, Carrie, for chiming in. I appreciate that.
I think as much as we can target everything we're doing to what kids really need, the better we can serve kids. And Matt Burns also said that you can't have strong tier 3 without strong tier 2, and you can't have strong tier 2 without strong tier 1. So really it always comes back to tier 1, which we say at Oregon RTI all the time. It always comes back to tier 1. So
I agree, definitely agree. Yeah, and one thing I like to do when teachers are working or schools are making instructional or curricular decisions for tier 1 and 2 and 3 is to maintain some consistency in the instructional approach across the tiers. So if you're using a phonics curriculum in tier 1 that may have students stretching words, then if you're using one in tier 2 that has students tapping or a different scope and sequence, or if you're using, something that has a different methodology, I would be confused as an adult. So imagine how overwhelming it is for a child to say, well, in Miss Smith's class, we do it this way, and we didn't learn this yet, but we skipped over it here when I get pulled out to go with my other teacher. So I always like to say, like, make sure there are curricular suites that have similarity in the approaches, and it's just the intensity and the methodology that changes amongst tiers. I would really recommend that. Okay, so Carrie shared the tap it, map it, and graph it in the Google Drive. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Keegan said, especially when there is a mnemonic, that can be very confusing if the approaches are very different too. Kristen asked, do you have ideas for what the other students are doing while the teacher is pulling small groups? I'm going to tell you, it's not chaos. It's not complete and utter chaos, and it's not lost instructional time. Because sometimes that comes to mind, like, well, if I'm pulling this group, the other kids it's kind of like the Wild West in the rest of my classroom where things occur. So depending on what you would like to incorporate, I usually have a set of students. This is going to be a little complicated. I'm going to try to explain it in the best way. I make little index cards for my students, and when I did their groupings, I did their groupings by fruit one year. So I had my strawberries group, I had lemons, I had green grapes and blueberries. Those were my 4 groups, and they had index cards for each activity that was happening while I was pulling teacher-led small groups. So a student could be a lemon, which was a yellow group. They could be a lemon when it comes to skill-based group, but if they were really proficient in like word mapping activities, then they might be a blueberry there. And if they're struggling with encoding, they could be a strawberry there. So I had little index cards so they knew which folders to pull when they went to different areas and literacy workstations in the classroom. That's really like, it can be a lot when you're first starting that out because you've got to have a lot of information to guide the proficiency and the ability and make sure it's tasks that students can do without the direct supervision of a teacher. But I would just recommend, one thing that I recommend mostly is to make sure that the other literacy workstations, the instructions, I wouldn't vary them between like maybe 1 to 2. So they're not going to literacy workstations and saying, well, Miss Mans, what do I do? And I'm with my small group. You know the instructions that you always do when you get to the Chromebooks, or you know what you're always working on when we get to your passages. You could be working with a passage and you're doing a word hunt and finding words within that decodable passage that fit. If it's a schwa-based passage, they could be going on a word hunt and then finding all the multisyllabic words that have a schwa and then maybe sorting it by which vowel the schwa is taking the place of. But the instructions are always the same. It's just the content that changes out. And so it kind of removes the resistance of confusion or not knowing what to do. And I think sometimes the kids like a break, from like always getting direct teacher talk, and they like to really show what they know. They put that in their folder, and then when they come, we would do folder check Fridays where I would just look for all of the activities in their folders. And so I would do folder checks and fluency checks on Friday. So it really depends what they're doing in other groups, but I would encourage you to maybe talk with your school community. What are some like evidence-based science of reading aligned activities that students can be doing depending on their grade level appropriateness and the information you get? That was a really long answer. But I hope that can kind of help just a little bit. Okay. So here is one thing that can happen in a skill-based small group. This is a 1-minute video of a school called Centennial Academy right here in Atlanta, Georgia. And this is Ms. Wilson, and she is doing a small activity in her skill-based small group. And this is kindergarten.
I want you to try to change a word. To see you write the word
Not first.
tot.
Oh,
Tot.
oh, yes.
Very good. Write the word tot.
Then you do it backwards this time. Wait, I need this more fun.
Write the word tot. Write the word.
I got time.
Great job.
Oh,
And I love the way Callie was checking to make sure that her sounds are in the right boxes.
oh, two.
Very good. Great job. Go ahead. Write. What's the next sound? I want you to change the word. Listen to me. Tot. Watch me. Watch me. Change the word tot to top. Change the word, listen, tot to top. Is that everyone touch? Touch each sound? I want to change ot to
Top. Top. Top.
So which sound do we need to change? Ot to, let me see you do it. Ot. Ot.
Daddy.
Ah. Which one do we need to change?
Right here.
Okay. So, okay. I don't know what these things are in the YouTube suggestions, so I'm just gonna go back here. Okay. In the chat, what are some things that you saw Ms. Wilson do with her students during that word chaining activity where they were substituting the final and initial sound in a word? Looking in the chat. Oh, Siobhan shared about Florida Center for Reading Research was her classroom Bible. Love the website and this accessible small group activities. Thank you, Siobhan. Yes. Oh, Keegan, you shared that too. Thanks, Keegan. All right. And Carrie said that the teacher was modeling. Very good. And it's quick and snappy. Yes, it's not long and drawn out. It's immediate feedback, blending and segmenting, corrective feedback. She called their attention. She's like, watch me, pointed to her mouth, made sure she had their attention. Of course, kids may play with erasers or, do the little like fiddling around things that they did, but it's still very quick and it's not going to take the whole small group time that you have. Okay, so that was the lesson. And I'm going to say, for me and my practice and what I've seen, I tend to advocate for seeing the lowest group first. Prioritizing high need students ensures equity and kind of helps to lift those students up. So this does not mean that you're not seeing the other groups or the other groups are on their own for your entire literacy block. You still have opportunities to provide direct instruction to all your groups so all students can work toward their goals. But I tend to see my lowest group first. And if it becomes a little too predictable, I would see my strawberries and oranges one day and then my oranges and strawberries the next day. And then kind of sort out the lemons and the blueberries the rest of the day. But we want to make sure that we close those foundational literacy gaps for students who are on the side of the learning spectrum that provides a lot of opportunities for them to grow. So with your frequency and your group scheduling, some schools have been blessed. Some schools I work with have 2 hours or 2.5 hours in their literacy block. And some states, the minimum is 90 minutes. If your schedule allows, you can see each group each day. So you can feel free to adapt the frequency of your groups or the order of your groups as you see fit. And an example could be your lowest group daily, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Or additional groups could be like 2 to 3 times per week. Or again, you could do every group every day, or you could do your, strawberry, orange every day. But I want to make sure that we are all seeing all of our groups, because all students benefit from small group teacher-led instruction in the Tier 1 classroom. Even if students have already showed mastery of multisyllabic words and they just need to bridge that into authentic text, you can do that in small groups, where that may not be like a grade level task, but you can extend your opportunities too in small groups. For progress monitoring, you have options for progress monitoring, and something simple that you could do is a pencil and paper progress monitoring as well. So maybe if your progress monitoring is based off of the core phonics survey, I would make like a little sheet of paper with a grid of 10 words, 5 words being real words, 5 words being nonsense words. And on my fluency checks Fridays and progress monitoring check Fridays, I would just kind of just informally check what the students got correct and just see, is my small group instruction working? Do I need to go back and clarify this skill, because I see all my students are just having an issue with this? And I would tend to tell you to talk to your school about what your norm is for progress monitoring. So with my lowest group, I would do a quick progress monitor weekly. I had my 4 kids here in front of me. I had my little checklist. I would say, I would pull this one, check, 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 while the others were doing tasks related to the decodable passages. And then I would go through each one, and that took maybe 6 minutes of my small group time on Fridays. And so the strawberries and oranges got it weekly, the lemons and green grapes got it bi-weekly, and then my blueberries got progress monitoring monthly. So I'm not sure, what your school says, or if you're utilizing other progress monitoring software, but that's just an easy way to just kind of collect some data along the way. And with your data, I want to encourage you too to share your goals with your students, so you can mutually set goals. And a student may not speak like this. They may not say, by next month, I'll read 20 words with vowel teams with 80% accuracy in 1 minute. But by having those goals for students, they know what they're working toward, and just kind of checking in like, hey, you got 5 words, you got 10, 15. All right, well, we're going to check. Are you going to be ready to meet your goal? And letting them like track it. I've had like student graphs of them tracking their goals, or like a checklist if they've met their goal, that just kind of incentivize them. But giving them ownership and investment and awareness in the process has been shown to improve student engagement. So whatever those goals are for students, if you could take one and make them like attainable and quick wins, then that would be helpful to share with your students. And then also your groups are very fluid. They are very, they're not a tree. The roots are not embedded in the tiles of your classroom where they're stuck in those groups for 180 or 190 days. These groups will change. So as you're looking at your progress monitoring data, you can move around your groups. You may have started as a lemon and now you're a blueberry by middle of the year. And then you stay a blueberry till the end of the year. You can adjust group members, instructional approaches, and frequency as you need. So if you're working with the oranges on words with short vowels and digraphs, and then you decide, you look at all of your progress monitoring information, or you redo your reading draft middle of the year, and you say, these 5 kids need to be oranges. These 5 kids were not oranges before, but I'm going to pick up with them where I left off with the other oranges. That doesn't work. You have to give them what they need. So the group members and the instructional approaches may change too. Some schools do every 9 weeks, they reconfigure groups, but just keep them flexible. And lastly, well, this is the second to last slide. In the chat, please share which of these approaches you're already doing or excited to try out with your classroom or classrooms. So what is just one takeaway from today that you may have picked up, or something that you're doing that I didn't share and would love to learn about too? And this is my last time asking you for the chat. So thank you so much for everyone who's been utilizing the chat. And again, I know some of us are multitasking, and that's okay too. We're glad you're here. Mary Jo talked about UFly and those resources, those rolling reads. Rolling reads are really easy to implement because it's the same format, same materials, and it's just the words that change too. And thank you for sharing that link, Mary Jo. Tammy's got to go. Thank you, Tammy, for being here. And Caitlin loves the idea of getting students involved in the goal setting and what you're focusing on together. Thank you so much for your responses. Okay, as the rest of the responses trickle in, here are my citations here and sources that are linked. Some of the sources are not in this presentation, but it's just really good research that I love. And the link to Cox Campus is down at the bottom. I see that Martha is interested in using the Cox student profile and the AIMS flowchart resource. And Chantel is excited to start tier 1 with teachers and start out slowly. Make sure it's attainable and it's not overwhelming. And you have a wealth of resources. And if you need anything, Oregon's where it's at. I don't know if you're in Oregon. And thank you, Caitlin, for the analogy of the foot pain and going to the doctor. Feel free to use that. Please steal that. Like, use it and just use it as you see fit, because sometimes we have to conceptualize things with how they resonate with us, but you have my consent to use that. Caitlin, thank you so much for your encouragement, and thank you to everyone who's been participating. Yes, Pennsylvania is getting a pass. So thank you so much for your time today. If you want to get in touch with me, my contact information is here. If you have a question about something, you can email me or send me a DM on Instagram, I guess. I don't know. I'm a millennial talking here, but anyway, send a carrier pigeon, send whatever you need. But thank you so much for your time today. There is anywhere in the world that you could be, and you chose to be here. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm grateful for you who you show up every day, you do the work, and you're making a difference in the lives of children whose futures will be better because of educators like you who are continually learning and doing the work. So I'm going to thank you, and I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions in the Q&A or in the chat.